Welcome to PhD with Women on It Hack the Future. My name is Beata Young, and today's PhD Positivity Hack delivered will be by our guest, Eva Galant. Today's topic is how to raise money and empower your audience in medical startup. Episode 63 starts here. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on Women on It, an inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, and female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to that hustle because empathy is my mojo. And empathy is critical when you raise money and empower your audience in a medical startup. Before we dive into the topic, let me mention a few highlights. Congratulations to Gunnar Stefansson on winning University of Iceland's first 1.5 million Icelandic krona prize for education in a suitcase project. Continue on being an inspiration to the world, and thank you once again for being a great supporter of our community, Gunnar. Congratulations to Nancy Ninha on winning Ingressive for Good and Malhab Canva Women Design Scholarship. Great job in hacking the future with Canva. We are loving Canva. I hope our lovely guest has got some Canva stories to tell as well, because who doesn't use Canva nowadays? Ella is a godsend to mothers, and mother Nordic startup that will focus on providing support for women during and after pregnancy. Congratulations, Ella, on your 450,000 euros funding. In today's episode, we are going to learn how to raise money and empower your audience in medical startup. Starting a startup can be most exciting and terrifying thing you'll ever do. And it's certainly not for the faint-hearted. It's a fun and exciting journey, but a journey nonetheless. It takes a lot of time, effort, and money, and it can be really hard to know where to begin. We've all heard the stories. A group of entrepreneurs gather in a garage to build a product, and before you know it, they are selling it to the world. It's an appealing notion for anyone who has ever been inspired by the story of Apple or Google. But what does it take to make that happen? You've got the idea, you've got the passion, and now it's time to get your hands dirty and get the ball rolling. Eva Galant, our guest for this week's Positivity Hack Delivered, has 9 years of experience in the international market in the tech and startup sector. She's an entrepreneur and co-founder of 3 startups. Her own health experience led her to build a medical app. She's the founder and CEO of Hashiona, the first medical app that helps manage thyroid conditions. Eva succeeded in product launch, strategy, marketing implementation, product innovation, driving new business opportunities, products, and solutions. Before moving to London, she successfully sold her company Elite Card, a B2C loyalty program with more than 400 partners and 3,000 paying customers. Tune in and stay with us. Ask some very critical question that you are going to only get from Eva. Answers that you need to get your startup, whether it's medical, whether it is just a business idea. Eva is going to help you because she's been helping startups as well as women in tech since what time did you start working in Geekers Carrots, Eva?
I think it was 2011. Long time.
2011. Long time no seeing, Eva,
Yes.
as well, because we joined a community of women in technology, Geekers Carrots, and since the beginning, since the formation of the community of women in tech, that started at small gathering in Warsaw, then spun out of Warsaw, spun into different countries, different continents, and made a good I would say, good bootstrapping opportunities for many of us women in technology. And also, judging by your story, by your personal journey, I think that opened you some world of opportunities. Eva, tell us where you are at the moment.
Hi, Beta. Thank you so much for the comprehensive and so nice introduction. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to being here tonight with you, ladies, and men, obviously, the supporting men. Where I am right now. So, obviously, Beta mentioned my history and the background is in IT. I work in IT for the last 12 probably years in variation of the industries, but right now my full focus is on Hashiona. Hashiona is a platform. I used to say mobile application because that's where we start, but it's actually a platform right now to help patients with Hashimoto and hypothyroidism. So everything related to thyroid disorders and autoimmune diseases. And we're aiming to be a digital therapeutic solution for those who struggle with autoimmune disease.
Eva, I met you, as I mentioned, in Poland some time ago. I guess it was 2014. It was quite a journey ever since, because you were focused on formation of community in Szczecin. Then you moved to London, as I recall, and you started your another project. Can you tell us a little bit about this project? It was something to do with sustainability. Tell us a little bit about what was that startup.
That was the close I get you mentioned, but that's true actually. The close was probably second or the third company I founded, and was a sustainable platform for women to rent a fully stylized outfits. Apparently, the story was very challenging and really a fantastic lesson for myself. Although the startup itself wasn't successful, we shut down the company after 2 years of the operation. We lost with the bigger competitors overseas, but we also, personally, I failed to raise the capital for the next round that time. So I think there's a couple of lessons here as well to be made. To be tall. And the close was like completely a different story that we have in Hashiona. But the main lesson here, I guess, is to never give up. I mean, if one startup will not succeed, it doesn't mean that the another wouldn't. So that's the main thing, to never give up.
Fantastic lesson, fantastic positivity hack to start our great discussion, ladies and gentlemen. And I see the first comment from Jane. Hello, Beata and Eva. Lovely to see you, Jane. If you have any question about how to start your idea, how to launch your idea, do not hesitate. Eva's been working and mentoring women in tech since 2011, so we know what you need to get you started. Eva, so back to Hashiona. It came from a need, I would say personal need, wasn't it? And how did you start forming that?
Yeah, so definitely is coming from my personal story. Yeah, the first time when I thought about Hashiona, that didn't exist at the time yet, it was in the moment when I was diagnosed. So probably 8 years ago. As you mentioned, Bata, I moved at some point from Poland, from Szczecin to London. And during this journey, after a couple of months being in London, I realized there's something wrong with me. So I feel very tired. I felt like I have no energy for even like a basic daily activities like taking shower or making my breakfast and stuff like that. And I really need a lot of sleep. At some point, I was sleeping even 13 hours per day. So I knew there is something not really okay, because back then in Poland, I used to work as a full-time employee. I had my side-on project, and I also ran the non-profit organization, Giger's Carrot, as you mentioned. So my schedule was always full, and I always was a person having a lot of energy. So long story short, at some point I landed in the doctor cabinet, and it's turned out I have both Hashimoto and hypothyroidism, which is basically the condition when your thyroid is underperforming. At that time, when I was, I don't know, 25, maybe 26 at the time, I really get a shock, mostly because, okay, the doctor told me, hey, you have a lifelong disease right now. Those are your pills. Please take one of them every single day before the breakfast, and then come back in half of the year for a revision of your dose. And that is the only advice I literally got from my doctor. And as an engineer, I freak out. I was like, okay, I may have this kind of disease. It may stay with me for the rest of the life, but how can I handle it? Like, is that everything what I should know about disease, and so on? So I basically came back home. I started to read everything which came into my hands. And one of the first things I did, basically having this technology background, was to checking the market. So I was like, okay, there's so many health tech products right now. Where is the solutions for me? Like, where is the product that's gonna to help me right now with the new disease I just got? And I was very, very disappointed because I didn't find anything really which was valuable or helpful for me at that time. So that was the first thought when I thought maybe there's somewhere a niche here. But I get started in thinking more about it in the moment when I realized the pills I got from the doctor, they don't really work as they're supposed to do. So, long story short, I took a couple of months break in my career just to focus on my health and trying to fix myself, as I mentioned usually. So, I bought all the books I could for the medicine student. I get a lot of fun and less fun medical equipment, and I try a lot of diet and different hacks that could potentially help me. And at some point, it took me 6 or 8 months. I get into the point that I could retrieve my old life, I would say. So I had the energy again. I didn't have any sleeping problem. I didn't gain any more weight, and so on and so on and so on. There is up to 45 different symptoms that those patients may have. So so there's a lot to choose from, and I personally have probably 32 of them. So the first moment was, okay, well, I was thinking maybe there's a niche, maybe this is business, maybe there's more women like me who need something to figure out with this disease as well. But that time and that particular moment of my life, I didn't have both energy and time to focus on creating something like that. I just wanted to help myself and forget I ever was sick. And then a couple of years later, when I basically was already in the remission, I have successful life, successful career, and so on, I started to relax a little bit more of my lifestyle. So I relaxed on the diet and the sport activity I did before. I got a job in American startup that was on a hyper growth, what they say, and I was this kind of high performance person launching the sites for this startup in many countries. So my lifestyle completely changed. I had a lot of traveling, all of those travels with a lot of jet lags, with a lot of eating out, being in hotels, and so on and so on. And in some point in my life, I was on a contract in Australia. I just wake up and I knew something is wrong. Something is wrong with me, and I probably should go to the lab and did some blood tests. And when I did, it turned out obviously I was out of the remission. And that was a turning point in my career, in my life, because I knew, okay, I may be very happy in this job, I may be very ambitious, but this is not how my body is basically not coping with this. And so I knew I will have to change something. And I came back from this contract back to home, which was home that time in London. And I quit. I didn't know what to do as a next. There was a couple of months when I was really thinking about Hashiona, but I was a little bit scary to start it. I after keeping in mind my fail from the last startup, which was the close one I mentioned, I was a little bit scared, and I was like, okay, should I really do it? How about if it doesn't work? I will burn all of my savings, I spend all of the energy, and so on and so on. So there was a lot of doubts. But then at some point, I was like exploring a lot of different options, and none of these options really work for me. So just to give you some idea what I was explored, it was anything from working from a big corporate, going from startup, and even like setting up a food truck in London. And then after analyzing all of it, my partner looked at me and he said like, you don't want any of this. I see you, I observe you for the last couple of weeks. Like literally follow your heart, do what you really want to do or you feel. And that was the moment when I said, okay, let's doing it. And that was the day when Hashiona was created, basically. It was
Lengthy journey. So Eva, I know you mentioned working for American startup. I think it was quite a challenging job, and if I am allowed to mention, that was a very I would call it masculine job to fill, a role to fill. I mean, it required a lot of rara boys club, joining completely different setup. Did you learn something from it? Was it a boosting experience, or was it I need time off just to clear my head?
That was definitely boosting experience, and I learned a lot during the job. That's true. Actually, it was masculine kind of environment, very fast, very challenging, and I only think like looking back on it, I think they put me on this position because they knew I'm a little bit crazy, and I wasn't really aware what I was signing for. So this is probably the way how I succeed in this position. So that's the one thing, but I definitely learned a lot, and I definitely have a plenty of good memory working for such a big and scalable organization. But at the end of the day, yes, my health a little bit suffer on it, and my body couldn't cope with all of this speed of changing the countries and huge responsibility and long hours and so on and so on. So. Um,
Are we allowed to mention the name of the company, or you wouldn't like to talk about it?
I think we could, yes. That's not a big.
Yeah.
It's not a big mystery. I think it can be also. It is also visible on my LinkedIn. So whoever will go there, will see I work for WeWork, and there is no secrets here, which I putting on, I guess.
So WeWork has a history of bro culture and quite a different dynamic to our usually kind of female values, which are huge focus on empathy and huge focus on giving something to the community. We know that WeWork has been exploiting some communities, specifically employers. Was it something that you would consider as a career option in the future, or you just want to be entrepreneur since then?
So first of all, I have some NDAs to with work on the place, so I cannot talk about everything I seen or experienced. But I can talk certainly about my own experience. And also, what wasn't very typical about my role, I was expansion manager, which meant basically I was out of the normal WeWork matrix structure that WeWork has. Which means also I had a little bit different experience than everyone else because obviously the position, department, and location really affecting it. And in my case, that all have been very fluent. We used to laugh that the expansion team was kind of like SWAT team. Whenever something bad happened in WeWork, or whenever there was a challenging market to open, one of us, one of the team member from my team were going there to fix things. So that from that perspective, I have learned a lot because there was a lot of learning on the fly, and there was a lot of responsibility, and there was a lot of various kind of skills that I require to get to be able to perform with this job. Just to give you some example how hilarious it was. Like I end up, for example, having a permission of working on the construction or above 3 meters in Western Australia and stuff like that. So sometimes that require me a lot of different skills, but all good fun. All good fun, and I would say it is always depends in terms of the career path that we're choosing. What do you need in your specific period of time and specific moment that you live? So just to give you my example, like I started getting into industry when I was an IT department student. And that was a super coincidence that I landed in the startup industry. Someone then, a friend of mine, basically knew that I was German speaker at that time, and called me telling about his sister startup that they wanted to create some loyalty app on Facebook and so on and so on. He was really like passionate about that, and he said they're looking for someone to help them with the German translation. So I started from this, and then I went through marketing and other departments, and I ended up being a stakeholder in this company. And so that was my beginning, kind of. But then after that, I worked as a contractor for various software houses and seed startups. And then in the between, I was trying to create my own companies. So as you mentioned before, I had this small company called Elite Card, which we exited before moving to London. Then in London, I have The Clothes, which was the fashion tech kind of company. And then after that, I came back to contracting again. And when I was contracting, also in various different cities, because there was some other city around the globe that I was flying to meet to meet the startups I was helping with, and I was changing the industry. So I was going through the fashion tech, going through robotic software, robotic process automation startups. I was going through medtech, some fintech, some blockchain companies, and so on and so on and so on. And in some point, I just realized, okay, that's super all nice because I'm learning new things, but I'm not growing as myself personally, right? Because I was in this position like to get to the startup, work closer with the founders, maybe fix something, maybe advise to them, doing this variety of different things. But I feel like it's not, I'm not growing. And at that point, I sit down and I thought, okay, like, so what should I do right now if I'm not growing where I am? Like, a super nice lifestyle, a lot of traveling, not a lot of work, and so on and so on. And then there was the point I realized, okay, I want to see what's going on when you are in a startup, which is over or after Series B. And that was the moment how I get into WeWork, basically. So I was like,
so it's quite a journey, quite a roller coaster, different industries, different things. But let's go back to our discussion today, which is how to raise money and empower your clients in medical startup. So how did you learn about medicine, or how did you learn it? Because it's a narrow kind of learning experience. I wouldn't say it's narrow, it's very broad. I mean, broad knowledge, but not specifically in your area of expertise, because you learned it the hard way. You're IT is a specialist, not really medical specialist. How would you approach, as somebody who's never done a medical startup, how would you advise them to approach this topic?
So I can certainly speak about my experience here because, as you mentioned, but I'm definitely a technology girl. I'm a technology person, and I never had anything to do with health tech startup. I mean, except of like being a contractor. So what I did in that case when I decided to set up Hashiona, I had this vision. I knew what the patient needs are. So I was really looking at the product from patient-centric approach. That was my first thing, because that was the only thing I understood. I didn't know anything about regulation that are on this market. I didn't know anything about fundraising for health tech startups. I didn't know anything like what are the kind of challenges in regulation on different kind of markets that Hashiona is operating even right now. So what I did basically, it may seems very funny for some of you, but I basically spent a lot of time talking to other people, the people that I knew that have experience, but also I was cold calling people from the industry without any closer connection. I found those people on the LinkedIn. I looked what they're doing, and I basically was sending them the message saying, "Hey, I'm the founder of Hashiona. We're helping the Hashimoto patients. Could you spend a 30 minutes with me to give me some of the insight on the industry to help me with some specific problem, to share your experience and so on." And knowing being in this industry for so many years, I knew people are very, very eager to share their experience with the first time entrepreneur or the people who are just getting a specific industry. And in that case, it basically was also the time when pandemic started. So just to give you a bit of view, we set up Hashiona like literally 2 or 3 weeks before pandemic started. So I obviously, as everyone, I a little bit panicked on the very beginning because the only way I knew to meet people was through going to events, conference, and so on and so on. So when the pandemic started and we all get locked up, my first concern was like, okay, how I'm gonna to meet people, how I'm gonna to see the industry, how I'm gonna to talk to my users. And yeah, that was the point. I just used basically LinkedIn and I talk as many people as possible. I literally sometimes have even like 15 calls per day.
So I understand that you had a very good supportive network in your community of contacts. I feel sorry that you didn't call me because it would be nice to catch up. But I understand you were very specific. You had a target to reach, and you wanted to get your startup started. We have some people asking questions here in the live show. It's great to see you, Agata. What advice would you give to a startup in finding funding? Is VC the answer, or friends, family, fools?
It always depends on what stage you are with your company. Obviously, if you are very early stage and you just have your idea, maybe a co-founder, some pitch deck, no product, no MVP yet, or just a very simple MVP, I would start with the FFF, so friends, family, and fools, and then switch to the VC. Why? Mostly because when you are raising the angel round or when you are raising the pre-seed round, it is very hard to find a venture capital that will believe in you on this stage. There's not so many. I'm speaking from your perspective, just by chance. There's not so many pre-seed companies, pre-seed venture capital firms that investing in specifically on health tech or generally in pre-seed startups. So that's much harder for you because if it's less of them, then everyone trying to approach them. So that is much harder. So I'll start with FFF. Although I always will say postpone raising capital as long as you can. Like in my case, I knew that launching Hashiona and even building MVP will take me up to 1 year. And I knew that this money for this startup and my own living costs have to come from my own pocket and my co-founder's pocket.
So bootstrap as much as you can until you're ready to hit the market, hit the VC or angel investor networks. We had some FFF startup founder a couple of months ago. That was Vlad Lena, just a couple of episodes ago. We will post a link to Vlad Lena's interview later in the show. And we have got another question from Olga Vesina. Agata is thanking very much. Very helpful answer. Thank you, Eva. As a technologies engineer, Eva, what was the biggest challenge in learning how to start up and run a business?
Okay, so that's a fun thing because if you asked me 2 years ago if I would see any treat of my for my startup based on my management skills, I would say nope. Never. That's something I'm really polished. I'm done. I know how to do it. But paradoxically, when you're running a company and when you get in the center point of employees, that's one of the biggest challenges I find. So it wasn't the technology, it wasn't the product. Obviously, the product and the market also surprised me. It's never like that. Even when you think, like I was thinking, I'm telling you what I had in my mind when we were creating Hashiona. So my understanding was I'm in this industry as a patient for 6 years. I have seen so many personal stories, so many personal tragedies, people going through losing job, people going through divorces, and so on and so on. So I know what the patient needs. So that was my first thing. Thing was like I have some kind of network, so it shouldn't be a problem to raise money. Another fail. And the third one was like, I'm very good at management. I did all of this stuff for many years. That will be easy peasy. All of these things, it turned out it will be that it was much harder than I thought, because the market very quickly verified what I had in my mind as Eva or Eva. Second of all, the fundraising took much longer than I thought. And the third thing, I also find it challenging to manage a big organization.
So you started pitching, you went to competitions. Was it online competitions, offline competitions? How was it for you, Eva? How did you approach these big names in the industry?
That's a good question. So first of all, when the pandemic started, I knew, as I mentioned, I panicked, and I knew I have to be visible in some way. And then I very quickly realized that actually pandemic can be a big chance for us as a Hashiona, as a very early stage company. Mostly because it saves us a lot of time and money for traveling to different events. So all the events, conference, startup pitches, and so on moved just like that into the internet. So right now, I was that time in the small town next to Cambridge in the UK. I knew I can basically use the opportunity to attend all of these events. It doesn't matter where are you right now, because the events were online. We're in San Francisco, we're in Berlin, we're pitching some events in Australia. So literally everywhere. So I used that. So that was my first thing. And second thing, which I really get into the point, it was to attend as many accelerators as possible as we get into. So Hashiona went through probably 6 or 7 accelerators, which was not very typical for either any startup or specifically a startup on our stage. But I was trying to use that network from the accelerator and the opportunity as much as possible. So that's how we get to be visible on the first stage. That was just before raising still.
Okay, so that was the first step. And then how did you find that, that moment of hitting the jackpot?
Yeah, so it's never easy. And if someone, well, usually the market benchmark is that if you raise a pre-seed or seed, it takes you around 6 months. So I thought that having my network for many years, I would be able to doing in 3 months. And that was the fail number one. It took me altogether 8 months. So even longer than I thought it will, comparing to the market standard. Because obviously, if you talk to venture capital, especially, there is, by the way, why we talk so much to the venture capital on the stage when I already said FFF is better, right? So the another challenge that pandemic bring us was the fact that all the business angel, they basically disappear from 2 reasons. First of all, angel, like comparing to the VC, they never advertise themselves, right? They are rather these people who are choosing the startup to invest in, and they don't want to get like 500 decks every week. So you can get into them only by a connection or popping up into them on some kind of events. Now, when the pandemic started, all events obviously canceled, but also the business angel, they started to focusing on the current portfolio to help the startups survive, because many startups obviously also had a lot of troubles because of the market being closed and people investing less and people spending, like consumers spending less, and so on and so on. So everyone was rather focusing on the risk of what they had on the plate, on the table, than looking for new opportunities to invest. So that was the first challenge. So with no access to the business angel, we started to focus on venture capital. And the first one actually approached ourselves. The first one approached us actually, even before we called around. And there was a fund from Czech Republic called Kaya VC. Kaya, historically called Enern, was a fund that was investing only in Series A companies, and then they created the Kaya VC as kind of another leg investing in early stage companies. So they approach us as a first, and they say, "Hey, what you're doing actually looks interesting. If you will be raising, please let us know." And that was the moment for me when I realized, okay, that's something that someone already see us. All of the efforts we did up to the moment, it is visible. So I motivate myself to create a proper pitch deck, create proper forecast, and prepare myself for the fundraising. And the first one, this was pretty easy, I would say. So we started to negotiate, we get into the terms, we signed the term sheet. And the only condition that in this term sheet was super important for the investors said, like, we invest only if you bring other interesting people to the table to consolidate the round. So I was like, okay, that seems fair. We signed the term sheet. It was very quick. It all happened like maybe less than a month. I was super excited. They had fantastic, they have still fantastic portfolio, which includes 2 Polish unicorns. I did some kind of digging and due diligence on them because I didn't know them before, using the network, and I got a fantastic review. Basically, the founders were calling me 5 minutes after they got my message saying, like, whatever they offer, take it. They are super cool. They are very helpful. They will help you. And so we had a lead investor. I was very proud. It took us a month, and then the challenge, the struggle came later when we were trying to complete the round and convince more and more people. And that was a big challenge. There was a challenge.
So the challenge was to convince more people to join your platform or to invest.
To join the round, because
to join the round.
Yeah, and the reason behind of it was because basically we were always between London and Poland. Now, if you look at these 2 different markets, obviously from the consumer perspective, they are completely different, but they're also different from investment perspective. I'll give you an example. So when you raise your pre-seed in London, you should aim in around $500,000 of British pounds. That's kind of the standard. It could be a little bit less, it could be a little bit more, and so on. If you raise in Poland, that could be the same, although the currency is different. So instead of looking for $500,000 British pounds, you would be looking for like $500,000 of Polish zloty or something like that. So the valuation of the company and your run will be completely different. So my understanding was that if I'm between these 2 countries and I don't have any exit on my portfolio, I'm a little bit lower. So I will try to get £300,000 as a first one. So I thought it would be probably better for me or easier, or maybe easier for those companies to invest in me and so on. And then the reality was that it wasn't good for neither of this country or this market. Mostly because from London perspective, the investor were asking me, okay, so you're raising 300,000, why? And I was like, well, that's the cost we have. There's a plan. That's what we need to build the product. I have some of my team and R&D team in Poland, so it's a bit cheaper and so on. But the main question that it was for them is like, how do you want to compete with your colleagues and other startups on the market if you are undercapitalized? And I was like, Okay. And then it was very hard to convince, even with the lower costs of creating the technology, being having the team in Poland. Now, when I was going to Polish startup saying, "Hey, I'm raising the 300,000 euro or British pounds for my startup," they were like, "It's much more that we usually tend to invest on this market." So I was like kind of between, and that was a little bit harder for me.
So, in other words, if Eva was Evan, he would go for 1 million British pounds and would not worry about asking for the money. Whereas, so how did you tackle that challenge of asking for too little or asking for too much for some markets? How did you approach that?
I think you never should focus either if it's too less or too much. You should focus how much do you need. That's a real question. Because if you have a good reasons and good argument to break the quote that you are looking for, and you have this passion, you know your market, you know what you're doing, there will be always someone who will believe you and who will feel the idea, feel your vision, feel you, and trust you and invest in you. So that's the first thing. Don't focus so much on the forecast. Like, do I need half of a million? Do I need a million? Do I need, obviously, if you are implicit and come for 10 million, that there will be questions, right? But I mean, that's the money that you're raising is should come from the needs of, or the real needs of the startups. But I put one very important thing in this. If I would be Ivan, I would probably my life will be easier, because if you look at the numbers, ladies, that seems that only 11% of all capital from venture capital is going to the mixed team of female and male founders, and only less than 3% is going only to specifically women funded startup. All the rest is going for stricter men dominated startups. So the numbers showing that men have it a little bit easier to create something or raise the capital, have the access to it. But that's important. That's changing right now. Since the last 2 or 3 years, we see a huge shift. There's more and more female funds popping up. There's more and more visibility, and we, as an industry, as a society, we're talking so much about funding for the underrepresented minority. Not talking only about women, but also like people of color and so on and so on.
It's very kind of you to call us females minority, but definitely there is change. Change is not happening fast enough. So, ladies, whether you're thinking about medical startup, fashion startup, whatever it might be, this is your opportunity to ask Eva. We've got 15 minutes left of our show, and I wanted to talk because we talked about medical startup. Our focus is medical startup. I remember Jenny Defler joined us just this year, beginning of this year. She talked about her medical startup. She started in Israel, so big VC funding, big opportunities, and that was Air Doctor. Quite a different story, however, still quite a challenging one as well. She was working for big corporations as well. So I wanted to walk through with you, Eva, because we are talking about the focus of our discussion today is about finding how to raise money and empower your audience in a medical startup. And here is a very useful advice, or how to narrow down what kind of medical startup you have. So the healthcare startup world saw 4.5 billion in venture funding in 2015. I think it's raising double that money because of pandemic. All people suddenly realized this is something that we need to focus and we need to shift. I'm just making up some numbers, but definitely there is one very interesting facet showcased here by Kelvin Chan, who's a healthcare professional working on how data can help solve many of today's current health problems. So he narrowed it down into healthcare coordination startup, payment reform, personalized medicine, or patient empowerment. And we discussed with you, Eva, that your startup is a funky startup because it fluctuates between the three of them. Maybe you could narrow it down to patient empowerment, and you could tell us how is your startup empowering your patients
Sure.
or your
So
community.
definitely there's a three things on this graph that Hashiona is combining into, and that's patient empowerment, that's a personalized medicine, and that's a companion diagnostic or aftercare diagnostic. And in terms of Hashiona, we are right now position ourselves as a wellness and lifestyle app, but we aiming and we work hard to get into a digital therapeutics solution fully. To do it, we have to have two things, which are the patient trials and result and the full certification. Depends on the markets, obviously, either CE mark in Europe or FDA certification in the US. For Hashiona right now, we are performing with some preclinical patient studies, and hopefully shortly just after the seed that we are raising, we will be aiming to do a full patient trials, and then after that, going through the full certification process.
It's a long journey, definitely, Eva. Good luck with that. Let's focus on other facets of your startup. You built a team. Can you tell us who are your team members? Is it only Polish team members or is it mixed?
Yeah, that's definitely I think, guys. I mean, each startup require a team. They're not able to do things alone. That's obvious. In Hashiona cases, we have two phases. So when we build a product, we had a little bit more team members. We get into probably like 15, 16 people at some point. Right now, we are a team of 7 people. So that's the less. We obviously have a couple of different departments. Depends on the product stage. So the technology department is the one that is the most important, I would say, and on the very early stage. But then obviously you have to have a specialist from, in our case, that was the medicine specialists, so doctors and clinical dietitians. That was very crucial. We built as our USP a kind of lifestyle guidance for people with autoimmune disease. And we did it by analyzing 1,200 medical papers from the PubMed. So there was a lot of work putting into it. We basically wrote like kind of book, 120 pages of A4 font 9 before we even started to putting this in the app in a very gamified way. So the medical team, and then you have obviously sales, a business, and everything else which is required.
And what's the model? Is it pay per month, or what's the model for the startup?
So right now, Hashiona is operating as B2C SaaS platform, and that's the model. But long term, we want to go into refundation. So that's why we do everything to be a fully digital therapeutics company. And the program we created, supported by Diet and some support from the specialists, is bringing right now a really excellent scientific and medical results. So we are full of hopes that the journey will be very successful.
Well, we keep our fingers crossed for your success, Eva. What advice would you give to females to help their startup launch?
So just before, like when they have MVP or the product, ladies, that's super very simple. Which is never know. This is that just a joke. You have to be brave. You have to be brave enough with your bold idea, because creating a startup in innovative industry especially so much as well, high regulated like a health tech, is require you a lot of brave, a lot of persistence doing it. So there will be a lot of people who will tell you, look, it will never happen. That's maybe good but crazy idea, and nobody will trust you, and you don't have your medical expertise. How do you want to change it, and so on and so on. You were heard a lot. Like the same with the fundraising, right? Remember what I think it was the founder of Amazon who said basically you have to meet 200 different investors and say 199 no's just to hear one yes and raise $1 million or whatever you're looking for the first round. So you have to be persistent, you have to be brave, and you have to have your mind set up on the goal and just never give up, because otherwise you'll be discouraged very very quickly. So I'm
So
talking
be
about.
bold is simple idea for Eva to start your business. Now, Eva, none of us are able to achieve success without some help along the way. I know you've been praising your partner, you've been praising some people in the community around you. Who is the number one person you're grateful towards today?
Wow, that's a super hard, interesting question, because I think I wouldn't be able to point one person. There's so many people helping me on the journey, not only with Hashiona, but for my whole career path, that I wouldn't be able to count them and mention them on this call. But what I can do, I can mention three people that particularly bring me a lot of value and help and support in the last couple of years. And the first person would be actually another woman, Agnieszka Zdebiak. She was my first CEO, and she was the first person who trusted me on the journey and offered me some equity in her startup. There was a story that I mentioned that I was hired as a German translator and then went through marketing and then started to be CEO. She offered me the chance, and I'm really grateful for it, because that was a beginning and a chance for me to enter this industry, learn what the startups are, how the entrepreneurship works, and how to fundraise. All of it, what I learned basically started at that year. I think it was 2011. So I'll be forever grateful to Agnieszka. Another person who really helped me was my ex-partner in London, who was basically there for me when I was creating Hashiona. He was very supportive any single day through the time of over 2 years, being with me and seeing the hard work, the 10, 11 hours every single day, all of the struggles, all the emotional roller coaster which is coming with the startup. So I definitely will be very very grateful to James, and I'm also very grateful to the Hashiona team and my current co-founder Daniel. They just doing it, and without them, nothing would be same and nothing would be possible with Hashiona.
You're definitely a trailblazing machine. I'm really fascinated by your story and knowing that you are a leader in the industry and you attracted some funding and also you attracted a great team members. What is the number one book you can think and sit and think, oh, I wish I read it before I started my story with Hashiona?
Again, that's a hard question, because there will be many books that I like or many books that I find useful as well from the business perspective. But what I can recommend you is one of the books I read, or I went through the material from this book in one of the two accelerators I've been. This is the book of Bill Owlett, Disciplined Entrepreneurship. I hope maybe Batak, you could put the name on the chat, or I could actually. I'm not sure if you will be able to see that. I really recommend this book, especially for the first time entrepreneur. That's your guide, guys. Yeah.
We
If you
are
have
going to show
many
it
years ago,
shortly. Our team is working there assiduously. Discipline and Entrepreneurship by Bill Owlett. We have that book covered. Can you please give us your favorite life lesson quote? And can you share how that was relevant to you in your life?
Um, okay, maybe it's not a life lesson quote, but I would say as a startup quote that I'm using a lot. And that's a quote: "In God we trust, and everyone else must bring the data." It's something I really like, and I'm coming back to this quote even on my own thinking and strategy whenever I have to do or make any important decision. Just coming back to it and looking for the data to support that specific decision. And that is a quote of Edward Deming.
And you believe it because it is helpful in the times, challenging times of funding your startup.
No, I believe in it because of my engineering background. That's the first thing. And second thing, if you think about it, whenever you have to make an important decision, and in startup you have plenty of them, and it's about the investor you are inviting to join you. It's about your business model. It's about the market, or plenty of them. Is basically you have to have some support in it, and the data is what you're looking for really to help you with.
Imagine the pandemic is over, Eva. It's nearly there, and you can invite any person to have private breakfast anywhere in the world. Who would you invite, and where would you go to?
Mm, hmm, that's a good question. If I'm looking for some inspiration, I usually go to places, either California or Israel. You actually mentioned the last prelegence and speaker. I didn't have a chance to watch that yet, but Israel was always historically a place for me to learn a lot. They have the most venture capital firms on the square meters and then the per capita, I guess. So that's a really good place to have a mentor or to look for. California, obviously, from the same reasons, Silicon Valley and so on. I'm not sure if I mentioned someone right now that I would love to. Oh, yeah, actually, I could. So I'll tell you the story. Last week, I was. So Hashiona is a part of Draper University portfolio. And last week, I was actually in California, and the beautiful Pacific Hotel, invited by the Draper University team for the 2 days a conference, and I had a chance to listen to the fantastic speech of Tim Draper and Kathy Wood, the CEO of the ARK Invest fund. She's an investor with a really long track of success. So they both really impressed me so much. Tim, obviously, I knew him before, and like he's fantastic himself. But Kath, I didn't recognize, and that was the first time when I saw her and when I started to read about her and her knowledge, her passion, her expertise, like all of her. It's just literally Google her and listen to what she has to say. She is the innovator, the pioneer, and someone I really look up into right now.
Great, we'll check her out. Definitely, we want to follow the women who are at the echelon of doing epic shit. Well, it's the end of our story and end of our show today. Tough times never last, but tough people do, Robert Schuller says. And I would vouch for that. Eva is definitely a tough person who sustained Hashimoto, and is bringing you medical startup. Tell people, and they may forget, show them, they may remember, but involve them, and they will understand that is how Hashiona is built. Thank you very much, Eva, for interesting discussion. And next week, I invite everyone to listen how to create content that resonates with students, very young student who is changing the style of living for students in New Zealand. It will be recorded because New Zealand is slightly different world and different time zone. So imagine that pandemic is over and you could do anything anywhere in the world. This is your time to hack the future, hack the positivity you want. Thank you.
Thank you.